At Christmas dinner, my brother announced his engagement, and everyone cheered. Then my fiancée Jessica leaned over and whispered, "We need to talk, now." The way she said it made my blood run cold. 20 minutes later, I discovered that the woman I'd been planning to marry had been keeping secrets that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Marcus, 28, and I work as a software engineer in Seattle. My younger brother Dylan is 25 and works in marketing for a tech startup. We've always been close, despite our 3-year age gap. Growing up, our parents made it clear that we were both valued equally, though Dylan had always been more outgoing and charismatic while I was the quiet, analytical one. The Christmas dinner was at our parents' house in Bellevue, the same house where we'd grown up. Mom had been planning this dinner for weeks, inviting extended family from all over Washington state. The guest list included our parents Robert and Linda, Dylan and his girlfriend Melissa, our older sister Sarah with her husband Tom and their 2 kids, my girlfriend Jessica, and a handful of aunts, uncles, and cousins. Jessica and I had been together for 2 years. We'd met at a coffee shop near my office where she worked as a barista while finishing her degree in psychology. She was beautiful, funny, and seemed to genuinely understand my introverted nature. 6 months ago, I proposed to her during a weekend trip to Portland, and she said yes, without hesitation. We'd been planning our wedding for the following summer. Dylan had been dating Melissa for about 8 months. She was a graphic designer, creative and bubbly, and everyone in the family adored her. They seemed perfect together, always laughing and finishing each other's sentences. If I'm being honest, I was a little envious of how effortlessly their relationship seemed to flow. The dinner itself started normally. Mom had outdone herself with the traditional spread: honey-glazed ham, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and her famous cranberry stuffing. The dining room was decorated with twinkling lights and garland, and soft Christmas music played in the background. Conversation flowed easily as we caught up on work, discussed holiday plans, and watched my nephews excitedly talk about their Christmas morning haul. Jessica seemed a bit quiet during dinner, but I attributed it to the usual stress of family gatherings. She'd always been slightly intimidated by my family's close-knit dynamic, coming from a much smaller family herself. Her parents had divorced when she was 12, and she'd grown up primarily with her mother in a quiet suburb outside Spokane. About halfway through the meal, Dylan stood up and clinked his wine glass with a fork. The room gradually quieted as everyone turned their attention to him. He had this nervous but excited energy that I recognized from our childhood whenever he was about to announce something big. "I know we're all stuffed and probably want to get to dessert," he began, grinning at Melissa, "but I have something I want to share with everyone." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, then dropped to one knee beside Melissa's chair. The room erupted in gasps and excited whispers. Melissa's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with surprise. "Melissa, you've made me the happiest guy in the world these past 8 months," Dylan said, his voice slightly shaky with emotion. "I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" The ring was beautiful, a classic solitaire diamond that caught the light from the chandelier above. Melissa was crying happy tears as she nodded vigorously and said yes. Dylan slipped the ring onto her finger, and the room exploded in cheers and applause. Everyone jumped up to congratulate them. Mom was crying, Dad was beaming with pride, and Sarah was already asking about wedding plans. I genuinely felt happy for them, despite any small jealousy I might have felt about their easy relationship. Dylan was my brother, and I wanted nothing but the best for him. That's when Jessica leaned over to me, her voice barely audible above the celebration. "We need to talk now." Something about her tone made my stomach drop. It wasn't the voice of someone who wanted to discuss wedding planning or share in the excitement of the moment. It was serious, urgent, and slightly cold. "Can it wait until we get home?" I whispered back, trying to keep smiling as family members continued celebrating around us. "No," she said firmly. "We need to talk now. Outside." I looked at her more closely then. Her face was pale, and there was something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear? Guilt? I couldn't quite place it, but it made my chest tighten with anxiety. "Okay," I said quietly, standing up from the table. "Let's step outside for a minute." We made our way through the crowd of celebrating family members. I caught my mom's eye and mouthed that we were getting some air. She nodded distractedly too, caught up in the excitement to think much of it. The December air was crisp and cold, with the faint scent of snow that had been threatening all day. Our breath created small clouds as we walked out onto the back patio. The Christmas lights my dad had strung around the deck railing cast a warm glow, but I felt anything but warm. Jessica wrapped her arms around herself, shivering slightly. For a moment, we both stood in silence, the muffled sounds of celebration continuing inside the house. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm despite the growing knot in my stomach. She looked down at her hands, then back up at me. In the colored light from the Christmas decorations, I could see tears forming in her eyes. "Marcus, I need to tell you something, and I don't know how to say it." My mind immediately went to the worst possibilities. Was she sick? Had something happened to her family? Has she changed her mind about getting married? "Whatever it is, just tell me," I said, reaching for her hand. She pulled away slightly, which sent another wave of panic through me. "I've been seeing someone else," she said quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow. Felt like all the air had been sucked out of my lungs. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "I've been having an affair," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For the past 3 months, I stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. Inside the house, I could hear laughter and the clinking of glasses as my family continued, celebrating Dylan and Melissa's engagement. With who? I managed to ask. She was crying now, mascara starting to run down her cheeks. "Someone from work." "From my internship at the counseling center, a colleague." "No," she said, and something in her tone made me realize there was more to this story. "A client." My mind reeled. Jessica had been doing her practicum at a mental health clinic as part of her psychology degree. She'd told me about the strict ethical guidelines, the boundaries that had to be maintained. "A client," I repeated, trying to understand. "Jessica, that's completely unethical. You could lose your degree, your license, before you even get it." "I know," she sobbed. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to happen." It started as conversations after sessions, and then we started texting. And then she trailed off, but I didn't need her to finish. The betrayal was complete enough without the details. "How long?" I asked. "I told you, 3 months." "Long have you been planning to tell me?" She looked away, which was answer enough. "Were you ever going to tell me?" I pressed. "I don't know," she admitted. "I kept thinking I would end it, and you'd never have to know. But then watching Dylan propose to Melissa, seeing how happy they are, how honest their relationship is, I couldn't keep lying to you." Standing there in the cold December air with Christmas lights twinkling around us and the sounds of my family's joy echoing from inside, I felt completely numb. The woman I'd planned to marry, the woman I'd been building a future with, had been living a double life for months. "So what now?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She took off her engagement ring and held it out to me. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. You deserve so much better than this." I took the ring and slipped it into my pocket, the metal cold against my fingers. Inside the house, someone had started playing Christmas carols on the piano, and I could hear voices singing along. "I'll pack my things and stay with a friend tonight," Jessica said. "We can figure out the apartment situation later." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She started to say something else, maybe another apology, but I held up my hand to stop. "Just go," I said quietly. She hesitated for a moment, then walked around the side of the house toward the front where we'd parked. I heard her car start and drive away, leaving me alone on the patio with the Christmas lights and the distant sound of my family celebrating new beginnings while my world quietly fell apart. I stood on that patio for what felt like hours but was probably only 10 minutes. The cold December air bit at my cheeks, but I couldn't bring myself to go back inside. Through the window, I could see my family still celebrating. Dylan showing off Melissa's ring to our cousin Jake, Mom wiping happy, tears from her eyes. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Eventually, the sliding door opened behind me. It was Sarah, my older sister, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. "Mom sent me to check on you," she said, handing me one of the cups. "She said you and Jessica stepped outside, but that was 20 minutes ago." I took the hot chocolate but didn't drink it. The warmth felt good against my cold hands. "Where's Jessica?" Sarah asked, looking around the empty patio. "She went home," I said simply. Sarah studied my face in the Christmas lights. She'd always been good at reading people, probably came from being a high school counselor. "Marcus, what happened?" I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud yet. Instead, I just shook my head. "Do you want to talk about it?" "Not yet," I managed. She nodded and stood beside me in comfortable silence. Inside, someone had started a Christmas movie, and I could hear the opening credits of It's a Wonderful Life playing. "I should probably head home," I said finally. "You could stay here tonight," Sarah offered. "Sleep in your old room." The thought of going back to the apartment Jessica and I shared made my stomach turn. All her things would be there, reminders of the life we'd built together that had just crumbled. "Actually, that sounds good," I said. Sarah squeezed my arm. "I'll tell Mom and Dad you're not feeling well, food poisoning or something." I nodded, gratefully. The last thing I wanted was to explain what had happened while everyone was celebrating Dylan's engagement. We went back inside. I managed to put on a convincing performance of someone who was suddenly feeling sick. Mom immediately went into maternal mode, feeling my forehead and offering to make me soup. Dad suggested I take some antacids. Dylan barely looked up from showing wedding venues to Melissa on his phone. I made my way upstairs to my childhood bedroom, which Mom had kept exactly as I'd left it when I moved out for college. The same navy blue walls, the same desk where I'd spent countless hours doing homework, the same twin bed with the Star Wars comforter that I'd been too embarrassed to take to college. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. 7 missed calls from Jessica and a string of text messages. "I'm so sorry. Please call me back. I know I messed up everything. I love you, Marcus. I know I don't deserve to say that anymore, but I do. Can we please talk about this?" I turned off my phone and shoved it in the nightstand drawer. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes and bacon drifting upstairs. For a brief moment, I forgot where I was and why I was there. Then reality crashed back down on me. Made my way downstairs to find Mom at the stove, still in her Christmas morning robe, making breakfast for everyone. Dylan and Melissa were at the kitchen table, looking at wedding magazines. Sarah's kids were playing with their new toys in the living room. "There he is," Mom said, turning around with a concerned smile. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "Better." I lied, accepting the plate of food she handed me. "Good, because we have exciting news," Dylan said, looking up from a magazine. "We've decided on a date. June 15th. "Great," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. "Quick turnaround. When you know, Melissa said, beaming at Dylan. "Plus, my parents are helping with the costs, so we want to do it while the offer stands." I forced a smile and nodded. Inside, I was thinking about the July wedding Jessica and I had been planning. The venue we'd already put a deposit on, the invitations we'd ordered but not yet sent, the dress she'd been so excited about. "Marcus, you'll be my best man, right?" Dylan asked. "Of course," I said automatically. After breakfast, I finally worked up the courage to go back to my apartment. The drive through Seattle's quiet post-Christmas streets gave me time to think about what I was going to say if Jessica was there. She wasn't. But evidence of her hasty departure was everywhere. Dresser drawers left open, hangers scattered on the closet floor, her coffee mug still sitting in the sink from yesterday morning. On the kitchen counter, she'd left a note. "Marcus, I'm staying with my friend Rachel until we can figure out what to do about the apartment. I'll come by tomorrow to get the rest of my things. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I'm so sorry. Please don't hate me forever. Jay." I crumpled up the note and threw it away. Then I spent the rest of the day in a strange, methodical frenzy removing every trace of Jessica from our shared space. I packed her remaining clothes into boxes, took down the photos of us together, put away the wedding planning materials we'd spread across the dining room table. By evening, the apartment looked like a bachelor pad again. But instead of feeling better, I felt hollow. 2 years of my life had been reduced to a few boxes stacked by the front door. My phone had been buzzing all day with messages from Jessica, but I ignored them all.
Around 8 p.m., there was a knock at my door. I assumed it was Jessica coming too.
Collect her things. But when I opened it, Dylan was standing there holding a 6-pack of beer. Sarah told me what happened, he said. I let him in, and we sat on my couch drinking beer in mostly silence. Finally, Dylan spoke up. I can't believe she did that to you, man, especially on Christmas. The timing wasn't great, I admitted. Are you going to be okay? I shrugged. I don't really have a choice. Do you want to talk about it? Not really. We sat in silence for a while longer, watching a basketball game on TV. Then Dylan said something that surprised me. I always thought you two were perfect together. Yeah, well, apparently I was wrong about that. I mean, from the outside, you guys seemed so solid. She was always talking about how much she loved you, how excited she was about the wedding. This was somehow worse than if he'd said he'd never liked her. The idea that she'd been playing the role of the perfect fiancée while betraying me behind my back made everything feel even more surreal. People aren't always what they seem, I said. Dylan nodded. I'm sorry this happened to you, especially right now, with the engagement and everything. I know the timing makes it worse. It's not your fault, I said. Don't let this mess up your happiness. Still feels weird, you know? It's like I'm getting everything I want while your life is falling apart. I looked at my younger brother, who'd always been the more optimistic one, the one who believed in happy endings. Part of me wanted to tell him that sometimes people you trust completely can destroy you without warning. That love isn't always enough. That even the most solid relationships can be built on lies. Instead, I just said, life isn't fair, Dylan. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't enjoy the good parts. He stayed until almost midnight, mostly just being there. When he left, I sat alone in my newly empty apartment, surrounded by boxes of someone else's life, wondering how I'd missed all the signs that my relationship was a lie. The next morning, Jessica came by to collect her things. I'd planned to be gone when she arrived, but I overslept. When I opened the door, she looked terrible. Her eyes were red and puffy, her hair unwashed, and she was wearing the same clothes from 2 days ago. I brought a friend, she said, gesturing to a woman waiting by the elevator. I thought it might be easier. Good idea, I said, stepping aside to let her in. She moved quickly and efficiently, loading boxes into a cart. I stayed in the kitchen, drinking coffee and trying to pretend this was normal. The lease is in both our names, she said as she prepared to leave. I'll call the landlord today and get my name taken off, okay? And I'll send you money for my half of January's rent. Don't worry about it. She paused at the door, looking like she wanted to say something else. Instead, she just nodded and left. After she was gone, I sat in my apartment, which now felt too big and too quiet. For the first time since Christmas dinner, I let myself really think about what had happened. The woman I'd planned to marry had been cheating on me for months. Our entire relationship had been a lie. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the realization that I'd been so blind to it. How many times had she lied to my face? How many times had I believed her when she said she was working late or studying at the library? I felt stupid, naive, and completely lost. Everything I'd thought I knew about my life had been wrong. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, reviewing code on my laptop when someone tapped me on the shoulder. Up to see Melissa, Dylan's now wife, looking nervous and fidgeting with her wedding ring. Marcus. Hi, she said. Can I sit? I need to talk to you about something important. We hadn't spoken much since their wedding 3 weeks earlier. I'd fulfilled my best man duties, delivered a speech that everyone said was perfect, and smiled through the reception while internally comparing every moment to what my own wedding should have been. Sure, I said, closing my laptop. Melissa sat down across from me, and I could immediately tell something was wrong. She had the same look Jessica had that night on the patio, that mixture of guilt and fear that I'd learned to recognize. I don't know how to say this, she began, but I think you need to know about Jessica. My stomach dropped. What about Jessica? The person she was having an affair with, Melissa said slowly, wasn't just some random client. I stared at her, not understanding. What do you mean, Marcus? It was Dr. Richards, her supervisor at the clinic. The name hit me like a physical blow. Dr. Michael Richards was a respected therapist in his 50s, married with 2 teenage kids. More importantly, he was the person who was supposed to be evaluating Jessica's performance during her internship. Doll, you sure? I asked. Melissa nodded. I found out through a friend who works at the clinic. Jessica's degree program launched an investigation after someone reported the relationship. She's been expelled from the psychology program. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Vindication that there had been consequences for what she'd done, but also a weird sadness for the life she'd destroyed for herself. There's more, Melissa continued. Dr. Richards lost his license and is getting divorced. His wife found out about the affair and about other inappropriate relationships he'd had with students over the years. How long have you known this? I found out last week. I've been debating whether to tell you, but I thought you deserved to know. I thanked Melissa and sat alone in the coffee shop for a long time after she left, processing this new information. For months, I'd wondered if Jessica's affair had been some grand love story. If she'd left me for something real and meaningful. Learning that it had been a predatory relationship with her supervisor, someone who'd manipulated his position of power, reframed everything. But the strangest part was that I realized I didn't feel angry anymore. The rage that had consumed me for months had somehow transformed into something else, something lighter. That evening, I called my therapist, Dr. Susan Chen, whom I'd started seeing 2 months after Christmas. She'd helped me work through the betrayal, the self-doubt, and the depression that had followed. How do you feel about this news? She asked during our phone session. Relieved, I think I said. Not because bad things happened to Jessica, but because it confirms that what happened wasn't about me being inadequate or not enough. It was about her making terrible choices. That's significant growth, Marcus. 6 months ago, you were convinced that her affair was proof that you were fundamentally unlovable. She was right. In the immediate aftermath of Christmas, I'd spiraled into self-blame. I'd convinced myself that if I'd been a better boyfriend, more attentive, more exciting, Jessica wouldn't have strayed. The therapy had helped me understand that her choices were about her, not about my worth as a partner. The next few weeks brought unexpected changes. Dylan called me one afternoon while I was at work. Hey, can you meet me for lunch? I need to talk to you about something. We met at our usual spot, a sandwich shop near my office. Dylan looked stressed, which was unusual for him. Even during finals in college, he'd maintained his easygoing demeanor. Everything okay? I asked. Honestly, no. Lynn ran his hands through his hair. Melissa and I are having problems. I felt a familiar knot in my stomach. What kind of problems? Money. Problems, mostly. The wedding cost way more than we planned, even with her parents' help. We're both working extra hours just to make rent, and we never see each other. When we do, we're too exhausted to do anything but fight about bills. This was the last thing I'd expected to hear. From the outside, Dylan and Melissa had seemed to transition seamlessly from engagement to married life. I keep thinking about what you said at the wedding, Dylan continued, about how marriage isn't just about love, it's about building something together, even when things get hard. I remembered that conversation. It had been during the reception, after a few drinks, when Dylan had asked me for relationship advice. At the time, I'd thought it was ironic, given that my own relationship had just imploded. But I'd shared what I'd learned in therapy about healthy partnerships. Are you guys going to be okay? I asked. I think so. We're starting couples counseling next week. It's just weird, you know. I thought getting married would solve everything, make us stronger. Instead, it highlighted all the stuff we never talked about before. That's normal, I said. At least that's what my therapist tells me. Dylan looked surprised. You're seeing a therapist? I'd never mentioned it to my family. There had been too much going on with Dylan's wedding, and I hadn't wanted to burden anyone with my problems. Yeah, since February. Best decision I ever made. We talked for another hour about relationships, therapy, and the messy reality of adult life. For the first time since Christmas, I felt like Dylan and I were connecting as equals, rather than as the successful brother and the failed brother. A month later, something unexpected happened. I was at a work conference in Portland when I ran into Jessica at the hotel bar. She was there with a group of friends, celebrating someone's birthday. She looked different, older somehow, and sadder. She approached me during a lull in the evening. "Marcus, hi. Can we talk for a minute?" We found a quiet corner of the lobby. She looked nervous, picking at her fingernails like she used to do when she was stressed. "I heard you might be here for the tech conference," she said. "I was hoping I'd run into you." "How did you know I'd be here?" "Dylan mentioned it to Melissa, and she told my friend Rachel." I waited for her to continue. "I wanted to apologize," she said. "Really apologize. Not just say sorry because I felt guilty. Okay. I did to you was unforgivable. I know that now. I was in therapy for a while trying to understand why I made such destructive choices." "I heard about Dr. Richards," I said. She flinched. "Yeah, I lost everything. My degree, my career prospects, my self-respect. But the worst part was losing you, Jessica." "I'm not saying this to try to get you back," she interrupted. "I know, that ship has sailed. I'm saying it because you deserved better than what I gave you, and I needed you to know that I understand that now." We talked for about 20 minutes. She told me about the investigation, about how Dr. Richards had manipulated her, about the therapy that had helped her understand her own patterns of self-sabotage. I found myself feeling sorry for her, which surprised me. "Are you seeing anyone?" she asked. "I've been on a few dates," I said. "Nothing serious yet. I'm taking things slow." "Good. You deserve someone who appreciates what they have with you." After she left, I sat in the hotel lobby thinking about forgiveness. Not forgiveness for her sake, but for mine. Carrying anger and resentment had been exhausting. Letting go of it felt like setting down a heavy backpack I'd been carrying for months. When I returned to Seattle, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I applied for a position with a tech company in Austin, Texas. It was a significant promotion and a chance to start completely fresh in a new city. "Are you sure about this?" Mom asked. When I told the family at Sunday dinner, never lived anywhere but Seattle. "It's exactly why I want to do it," I said. Dylan was supportive but worried. "We'll miss you, man, especially now that Melissa and I are working things out." "I was hoping we could hang out more. Austin's not that far," I said, "and you guys can visit." The truth was, I needed space from all the memories. Every coffee shop, every restaurant, every street corner in Seattle reminded me of Jessica and the life we'd planned together. Starting over somewhere new felt like the final step in rebuilding myself. 3 months later, I was living in a one-bedroom apartment in Austin, working for a company that valued my skills and slowly building a new social circle. I joined a hiking group, started taking cooking classes, and even signed up for a pottery workshop on a warm September evening. I was at a food truck festival with some coworkers when my phone rang. It was Sarah. "Marcus, I have news," she said, sounding excited. "Dylan and Melissa are pregnant." I felt a genuine surge of happiness for them. "That's amazing. How's Dylan handling it?" "He's terrified and thrilled. They've been doing so much better since they started counseling. This feels like perfect timing." After I hung up, I realized something had shifted. For the first time since Christmas, thinking about my family's happiness didn't make me feel left behind or inadequate. I felt proud of Dylan for working on his marriage, happy that they were expanding their family, and genuinely excited to be an uncle. A week later, I met someone. Her name was Emma. She was a veterinarian, originally from Colorado, and she had the most infectious laugh I'd ever heard. We met at the pottery class, where she was creating what she generously called abstract bowls, but which looked more like clay disasters. "I think your bowl is having an existential crisis," I said, watching her attempt to shape the clay. "At least it's having some kind of crisis," she replied. "Mine just looks like it gave up on life entirely." We grabbed coffee after class, then dinner the following week. She was funny, kind, and refreshingly straightforward. When I told her about my move from Seattle, she shared her own story of relocating after a difficult breakup. Sometimes you have to go somewhere completely new to remember who you are, she said. We took things slowly. I was honest about my recent history, and she was understanding about my need to rebuild trust gradually. She had her own walls to work through, having been engaged to someone who'd left her for his ex-girlfriend just months before their wedding. We're both refugees from other people's bad decisions. She joked after we'd been dating for a month, on Christmas Eve. It's almost a year after the dinner that had changed everything. I was video calling my family from my apartment in Austin. Was showing off Melissa's growing belly. Sarah's kids were demonstrating their new dance moves, and Mom was giving me a virtual tour of her Christmas decorations. We miss you, Dad said, when it was his turn to talk. It doesn't feel the same. Without you here, I miss you guys too, I said, and I meant it. But I'll be home for the baby shower in March. After we hung up, Emma came over with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. We sat on my couch, eating lo mein and watching old Christmas movies. Any regrets? She asked during a commercial break. What? Moving here? Starting over? All of it. I thought about it for a moment. A year ago, I'd been planning a wedding with someone who was betraying me. I'd been living in a city I'd never left, working a job that was fine but not fulfilling, and defining myself largely in relation to other people's expectations. Now, I was living in a place I'd chosen, working a job I loved, in a relationship, built on honesty and mutual respect, and most importantly, I knew who I was when I was alone. No regrets, I said. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be exactly what you needed. Emma smiled and leaned against my shoulder. Here's to beautiful disasters, she said, raising her wine glass. Agreed outside, I agreed. Outside my apartment window, Austin twinkled with Christmas lights. And for the first time in years, I felt genuinely excited about what the future might hold. Jessica's betrayal had destroyed the life I thought I wanted, but it had also freed me to build the life I actually needed. That night, as I was falling asleep, I thought about Dr. Chen's question from months earlier about what I'd learned from everything that had happened. The answer was simple. I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. Happiness was something I could create for myself, and that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is having your old life completely fall apart. It gives you permission to build something better. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.